All right, y'all. What we're going to do first, we're going to just go over those problems from yesterday. I know that y'all did them with that yay math man. Hopefully he wasn't too irritating for you, but you know how it goes. Sometimes he can be a little bit much. But I just wanted to work through these with you to make sure that you got it all figured out and you kind of heard it the way you were used to. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to rewrite our division problem. So the thing that's on the top right here is what goes inside our division sign. So there's my division sign. And so then I'm going to put x squared plus 6x plus 5. So the part that was on the top, we put inside the division sign. Now this part that's on the bottom, it actually goes outside. And some terms that you might have actually heard before, this is called our dividend because it's inside, dividend. And then outside is the divisor. And I think of that because he's like outside the door. You know, every little thing helps you remember. So the first thing we do is we look at our very first term. So we've got an x. And I say, how many x's go in to x squared? Okay, x times what gets me x squared? And y'all all know that answer is x. Because x times x is x squared. Okay, so now what we do here is I take my number that I put at the top, and what I'm doing is I'm basically distributing. I'm saying x times x is x squared, and then x times 1 is 1x, and it's positive, so that's why I put the plus sign. Okay? Now, just like you do with long division, we've got to subtract. So I have to subtract these terms that I've got right here. So remember, whenever we do this, my subtraction is going to mess with the signs of both of my terms. So this isn't really positive x squared. It's going to be x squared minus x squared, which is going to make these two terms cancel out. And that's what you want. And then these terms, 6x minus positive 1x. So 6x minus 1x is going to leave me with 5x. Okay? Everybody see where I got that from? So all I did was I said x times x and got me x squared. X times 1 and that got me 1x. But then I have to subtract these terms from my original problem. So x squared minus x squared, that made that cancel out. And then 6x minus 1x got me 5x. Well, now I've only got one term here. I've got to bring one on down. So let me get that 5. And it's a positive 5. So let's bring down plus 5. Okay. So now I've got a new set of numbers that I need to see. X times what gets me 5x? X times what gives me 5x? Well, I bet you already know. X times 5 gets me 5x, so plus 5. So now I have already distributed the x right here and got these terms. Now I need to distribute the 5 to get my new set of terms to subtract. So I'm going to be distributing the 5 to both of those terms. So I'm going to say 5 times x is 5x. And 5 times 1 is 5. But now, just like we did right here, I'm going to have to subtract these terms. Oh, I'm sorry, that was a plus 5. So I'm going to have to go in and subtract these terms. So subtracting here, what's 5x minus 5x? Well, That's 0. They cancel out, so those go away. And then what is 5 minus positive 5? 5 minus 5 is 0. That means we have a remainder of 0. So you are done. So the answer to this problem would just be x plus 5. Now, there's always a way that you can check your work to make sure that you got the right answer. And that way of checking it would be to take that x plus 5 that you got, and you're actually going to multiply that x plus 5 times the number that we had up here, this x plus 1. And if you FOIL that out, or if you do the box method and you end up getting this same exact answer, then you know you got it right. Okay? Now, what we did, we actually just did this problem, but we did it the dividing way. I just wanted to make sure we had some problems because y'all know I write big as can be. Okay, now let's go down and look at one of these numbers that had one of the bigger leading coefficients. Okay, so looking at this one that had the 5x to the third, first thing we have to do is we got to set it up. So when I set it up, on the inside, I've got to put that top number. 5x to the third minus 13x squared plus 10x minus 8. Okay? Didn't do any math yet. All I did was I rewrote it using my long division sign, and I put the top number on the inside. Now my bottom number, it goes on the outside. And remember, dividend goes inside, divisor is knocking at the door. Okay? So now, here's what we do. We take our first term, x. X times what gets me 5x to the third? What do I need to turn my plain old x into 5x to the third? Well, first of all, I know I'm going to need me a 5, right? So I know I got to have me a 5, and I know I got to have me an x. Now, how am I going to make plain old x into x to the third? How many more x's do I need? I got 1. I need 3. So I guess I'm going to need 2 more. So hold on real quick. Let's double check that. To make it go from x to 5x to the third, what did I need to make it go from x, from plain old x, to 5x to the third? Well, I knew I needed a 5 for sure. I got to have that coefficient. And then I only have 1 x right here. I need 3, so I got to have 2 more x's. That's where x squared came from. Now, what do we do next? What do I do with that 5x squared? I got to bring it down. I got to distribute that 5x squared times each one of these terms. So 5x squared times x, remember that's like having an imaginary 1 right there. So that's going to be 5, and then I add my exponents. 2 plus 1 is 3. So it's going to be 5x to the third. Okay, now I've got to multiply this one. 5x squared times negative 2. So 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. And then x squared, I don't have an x term over here, so I'm just going to have to bring down that x squared. Now, as you remember, right here when we've got our terms lined up, we're going to have to do some subtraction. So 5x to the third minus 5x to the third, well, those terms are going to cancel. And negative 13x squared minus negative 10, well, minus negative is the same thing as plus positive, okay? So negative 13x squared minus negative, well, that's going to make that a positive right there. So negative 13 plus 10x squared is actually going to get me negative 3x squared. Did everybody see how my sign changed right there? Because it ended up being minus negative. And we all know that minus negative turns into a positive. Now, how do I get my other term? Well, I got to look up here at my 10x. I got to bring him on down. Now 10x gets to be in the mix. Okay. So now I'm ready to do some multiplying again. Okay. I start with that first term. What do I need? I've got x to the 1. What do I need to do to that x to the 1 in order to turn it into negative 3x squared? Well, first of all, I know I got to have that coefficient. I got to have that negative 3. So I know I'm going to have me a negative 3 and an x. Okay, this is x1, but this is x2. So I need one more x in order for it to turn into x squared. So that's where my x1 comes from, because 1 plus 1 is going to get me down to 2. Everybody see that? For me to turn my plain old x, my x to the 1, into negative 3x squared, I have to have me another x in there. That's why this one is negative 3x. Now, what do I need to do with my negative 3x? I got to multiply that negative 3x times both of these terms. So negative 3x times x is going to be negative 3x squared. And then I have to say negative 3x minus 2. So that's going to be negative 3 times negative 2. That's positive 6. And then it's just going to be an x. Now, just like the other ones, we got to subtract them. So negative 3x squared minus negative 3x squared. Remember, minus negative makes this into a positive. So these two actually end up canceling out. They become 0. And then 10x minus 6x, that's going to be 4x. Now how do I get my other term? I just go on up, I grab my negative 8, and I bring them on down. Alrighty, so now, last time, almost done. X times what gets me 4x? Well, they both have just plain old x, so I know this term's not going to have an x in it. What do I need for this x to turn into 4x? What else does it need? That x is going to have a 4, isn't it? A positive 4. So then I just distribute. I say 4 times x is 4x. And 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. All right, let's subtract them things. (4x) minus 4x, that's going to be 0. They cancel out. And then negative 8 minus negative 8. Remember, minus negative turns into a positive. So negative 8 plus 8 is 0. So that means we have no remainder. So the answer to this problem was 5x squared minus 3x plus 4. Now, if we were taking a quiz and we wanted to make sure that we got that answer right, what could we do? We could take that 5x squared minus 3x plus 4, and we could just multiply it with our x minus 2. And what method do you think we would have to use there? Since this has 2 terms, but this one has 3 terms, can we use FOIL? No, we can't use FOIL, because FOIL is only used whenever we have 2 terms by two terms, meaning we're multiplying a binomial times a binomial. So this time, some of y'all I know like to say x times all of these terms and then -2 times all of these terms. You could do that. That's essentially the same thing as the box method, no problem. Okay, one more. This one we're going to go a little bit faster because I think you got it by now. On the inside, I've got 3x to the 5th plus 5x to the 4th plus x plus 5. On the outside, I got x plus 2. Okay. Let's scoot it on in a little bit. There we go. There we go. Okay. So, for me to go from plain old x to 3x to the 5th, I don't have a coefficient here, but I do here. So, I know I'm going to have me a 3. And then, okay, I have 1x here because that's x to the 1. But I have 5 here. How many more x's do I need to make it turn into x to the 5th? If I've got 1, I got to have me 4 more, don't I? All right. Now, I take that number that I just made, and what do I need to do with it? I'm going to have to distribute this number times each of these terms. So 3x to the 4th times x is going to be 3x to the 5th. That's what we want. And then 3x to the 4th times 2. So 3 times 2 is 6x to the 4th. Now, what do we need to do with these two? We're going to have to do some subtracting. So subtract right here. Okay, so 3x to the 5th minus 3x to the 5th, well, that's going to give me 0. So those cancel out. That's good news. And then 5x to the 4th minus 6x to the 4th. 5 minus 6 is going to be -1x to the 4th. Okay, now I got to get me another term. So what am I going to do? Bring him on down. Alrighty. So now 3x to the 4th. Okay. Now I'm trying to find x to the 1. How am I going to make that turn in to this?